This is the Rur Lowlands north of Jülich, the village of Tetz, population 600. Around 1980% of the people here earned their living from one thing: basket making. The poplar groves and river meadows that lined this valley were not landscape, they were raw material, and the willow that grew along the Rur was the foundation of everything this village knew how to do. The Rur River runs fast here, cold and brown along its poplar-lined banks. For generations, the people of Tetz came to this river's edge not to fish and not to swim. They came to plant willow. Row after row of cuttings pushed into the wet soil and left to grow into the material their families needed. May in Tetz. The traditional wreath on the house front, a miniature windmill in the center. Spring has arrived, and with it, the most important working month of the year. Walk down any street in Tetz in May, and you will smell it before you see it. Tannins, damp bark, green wood. Every house front has willow rods propped against it, hundreds of them, thousands of them, drying in the sun before they can be stored. The village looks like this every spring, has looked like this every spring for over 100 years. An old man carries a bundle from his barn. A child stands watching from the doorway. 3 neighbors stop on the pavement to talk beside a wall of drying rods. In Tetz, the willow season is not a trade event. It is the whole life of the village. Inside the courtyard, the family works together. Women pull green, unpeeled willow from floor bundles. Children sit on chairs beside the workspace. The mechanical peeling station dominates the center. This is how it used to look. Every member of the household involved, young and old. During the peeling season, children were given special school holidays, the same arrangement as the autumn harvest. The basket-making families of Tetz understood that the work required everyone, not by choice, by necessity. Willi Küpper is one of the last basket makers in Tetz. He and a woman feed green willow rods into the mechanical peeling machine, root end first, a slight rotation, then pushed against the spinning drum. The drum is studded with rows of spiral springs. The springs grip the loosened bark and strip it from the rod as it passes through. What enters green comes out white. Before machines like this existed, every rod was stripped by hand. 300 kilograms of green willow produces 100 kilograms of white. 2/3 of the weight is bark. Every kilogram of finished white rod was once 3 kilograms of green branch. Behind the machine, the waste builds up. Shredded green bark, leaf fragments, wet fiber, a pile that grows with every batch. In front, white rods emerge clean. The same branch that entered brown and green comes out gleaming and pale, ready to dry, ready to store, ready eventually to be woven into something that will last longer than the hands that made it. These are the water basins. Since February, the cut-look O-rods have been standing upright in shallow pools. At spring temperatures, the submerged roots develop fresh growth. Small green leaves sprout at the tips. That new growth is not accidental. It signals the exact moment when the bark separates most easily from the wood. Spring makes the work possible. Back at the machine, the technique matters. Root end first. Always root end first. A slight twist as the rod enters presses it more firmly against the drum. More contact, more friction, cleaner strip. The spiral springs on the drum do not cut the bark. They grip the loosened layer and pull it away as the rod moves through. The difference between cut and grip is the difference between a damaged rod and a usable one. After 10 minutes, one full bundle is done. At 50 to 60 bundles a day, the Küpper family spends 1.5 weeks on peeling alone for a single season's supply. If they were doing this by hand, it would take over a month. The machine they are using was built in 1958 by a locksmith from nearby Brachelen. Not a factory product, not a catalog item. A local solution to a local problem, designed specifically so the thin willow tips would not snap during stripping. Across the courtyard, the waste mountain grows. A child runs past it without looking up. For the children of Tetz, this is simply what May looks like. The iron hand clamp. Before 1950, this was the only method. A split iron tool fixed to a wooden post, each rod fed through individually, pulled by hand, full body weight. The older artisan demonstrates. He grips the rod, pulls hard. The clamp's spring tension grips the bark and strips it along the full length without touching the wood beneath. Then women and children take over. The men do the pulling. It is heavy work. The women and children do the finishing, removing what the clamp left behind. An iron hand scraper, a wooden knee clamp, bare fingers on stubborn fragments. The whole family arranged in sequence, each person handling a different stage of the same rod. At this rate, one full bundle takes 45 minutes. The machine does the same bundle in 10. But watch the older woman with the hand scraper. Watch how she holds the rod, how she angles the tool, how she reads the grain of the wood before each stroke. That is not technique learned from a machine. That is knowledge built over decades of handling the same material until the hands understand it better than the mind can explain. The woman in the blue cardigan uses the knee clamp, a wooden tool held between the legs. Left hand applies pressure. Right hand pulls the rod. Short, thin rods that are too delicate for the machine come here instead. The machine would snap them. The knee clamp holds them just firmly enough. Every tool in use here today was designed around the specific weakness of the willow rod, its tendency to break at the tip under too much friction. Every technique exists to solve that one problem in a slightly different way for a slightly different size of rod. By 1975, only a handful of basket makers remained in Tetz. What had employed 80% of this village now employed almost none. The machines arrived after 1950, but even the machines could not stop the decline. The white rods must be dried immediately after peeling. A woman in a red apron carries a full bundle to the drying lines, long wire frames strung between poles. She spreads the rods one by one, fanned out evenly so no two touch. Sunlight does two things here. It drives the sap out of the wood, and it gives the rod its characteristic white color. Rain would stain them. Cloudy weather would delay the whole operation. Bad spring weather could push the peeling season weeks behind schedule and cost the family significant working time. The white rods that dry here will be stored until the weaver needs them, then soaked again to make them flexible, then woven into what the trade calls white ware, fine baskets, shopping baskets, storage containers. Alongside the white rods, the heavy unpeeled gray willow bundles wait in storage. These will not be peeled by hand or machine. They will be cooked. The sign above the door reads, Korbwaren Genossenschaft, Basket Goods Cooperative, sales to everyone. Chairs, wicker armchairs, tables, fine basketware. This cooperative was founded in 1928 during the economic crisis years. A collective of basket makers from Tetz and several neighboring villages joining together to source raw materials, find markets, and sell their finished goods. Two workers push a firewood cart toward the boiler house at the rear. What happens inside that building is what turns gray willow into brown. Inside the boiler facility, the brick vat is built into the concrete floor, deep enough for a man to stand chest high inside it, long enough to take a full willow bundle lying flat. The older artisan climbs in and begins stacking the bundles. Root ends outward, always outward. If the roots face inward, the willow will float and cook unevenly. Roots outward means the tips go under and the whole bundle stays submerged. Bundle after bundle goes in. He packs them tightly, steps on them with his boots to compress them into the corners. 40 to 45 bundles fit into this vat at capacity. Then the wooden planks go on top. Thick, heavy boards laid across the mouth. A crossbeam wedged against the brick walls. Wooden wedges driven in with a mallet. The willow will want to float. The wedges will not allow it. Then the stones. Concrete blocks lifted up and placed across the wooden planks. Physical weight added to mechanical lock. The vat is sealed. Then the water. Bucket after bucket poured down through the gaps. Just enough to cover the willow, no more than that. Then the fire. The iron furnace door swings open in the base of the brick wall. Logs fed in. The fire takes hold. The chimney outside begins to smoke. This cooperative had one of only a few boiler installations in the entire Rur Lowlands. Most basket makers shared access to facilities like this. They stacked their willow in the evening, fired the furnace in the morning, and waited 2 hours before the water begins to boil. Then the steam comes. Thick white clouds bursting up through the gaps in the wooden planks. The boiler room fills completely. Inside the vat, the water turns dark. The tannins in the willow bark leach out into the liquid, turning it brown and foamy and smelling of the forest floor. Depending on the age of the willow, the cooking takes between 2 and 5 hours. Older material needs longer. The basket makers avoided old willow when possible, not for quality reasons alone, but to keep the cooking time short and the firewood consumption low. Every hour of boiling is firewood. Every log has a cost. The cooperative managed this carefully. When the willow is done, it is what the trade calls ripe. The bark separates from the wood with almost no resistance. A thumbnail is enough. After cooking, the bundles are lifted out and cooled, then stripped immediately while still warm. The tannins that cooked into the wood have done something permanent. They have stained the rod, turned it a rich reddish brown. That color is not decoration. It is the mark of the process. White ware and brown ware are not two different materials. They are the same willow rod treated two different ways. One stripped cold in the spring sunshine. One cooked in a brick vat for 5 hours. The color tells you which method made it. The cooked bundles dry against the house wall. Rich reddish brown, dense and warm. Alongside them, the white rods, peeled, cold, dried in sun, lean against the brick in their hundreds. The street of Tetz, willow on every pavement, white on one side, brown on the other. By 1975, this was already the past. The basket makers were almost gone. This film is the last record of what they did. Subscribe. More of these trades are coming.